Hello, everybody. Welcome to Radio 815. I am Matt Crandall, co-hosting, as always, with Marcelo Inostroza, and we are coming to the end of the road. We are taking a look at our top 5 episodes of Season 4 of Felicity, the senior year, the final year, the year and a little bit extra of Felicity. We talked about the Declaration, which last week was the season premiere that was actually the last episode that Matt and JJ had the main credits on. So they did still have their hand in producing and, working on the show, but they didn't write and direct any of the final episodes that we're going to be talking about. But there were some really good ones in this year. Starting on both of our lists is episode 6, Oops, Noel Did It Again. Written by the brain trust kind of last season and this season again, Jennifer Levin, Josh Reams, directed by Craig Zisk, who did a lot of episodes of Weeds, for people out there. And this one, really solid episode, focusing a lot and introducing the arc of the trouble with Ben's dad and his liver. So John Ritter makes a welcome return to that, and Ben has to deal with his father's illness and being given the responsibility of getting the power of attorney. The comedy storyline is partly Noel lets 2 obnoxious freshmen move in to the apartment with Felicity and Elena, and Richard is just thrilled that is happening, but they are actually obsessed with Noel, which is why they want to be there. And Felicity has to deal with some stuff with Professor Cavallo, who she thinks may be hitting on her when they go out for lunch to talk about her artistic future. So I thought really solid episode, because really good drama with the Ben's dad stuff and the Felicity not knowing what to do with that professor, not sure if she's reading the situation wrong. And then the episode culminates where Oops, Noel Did It Again, where Ben and Noel have a huge showdown, and Noel tells Ben that he slept with Felicity and drops a bomb on the whole episode.
This episode really, it was kind of painful for me to sit through. I mean, all throughout watching Ben really come to terms with his father's illness really brought me back to when my mom suffered her stroke. And the fact that it happened all of a sudden. Actually, it happened when I was here. I heard it, actually. It scared the crap out of me. I'm not the one that called the hospital and everything. But when I saw that storyline, it was really, really hard for me to make it through this episode.
Yeah.
And I really felt bad for Ben. And I appreciated the fact that a show like Felicity, that I've said before, doesn't necessarily have to tell stories like this. But the fact that they do, and the fact that they give their characters time to sit with whatever issue they're dealing with, I really appreciate it, because there are some shows that deal with issues like this, but they don't give their characters enough time to process their feelings and the situation. And the fact that Ben had to be the one that eventually made all his father's decisions as far as his care is concerned really rang true to me, because when we had to put my mother on a ventilator, it was really a group decision that we all made together. And I really was touched that my family wanted my opinion, and they respected my opinion, and they took my opinion into consideration before we all made a decision. And eventually, when we had to take my mother off the ventilator to let her go, it was just awful. And that's why I particularly found this episode hard to get through, but I really, really felt a sense of catharticism, if that's even a word,
Right.
watching this episode. That's why this might sound a little odd. This episode, among all the episodes of Felicity, is my favorite one. And the other episode, I can't remember the name of it right now. I'm so sorry. Where Felicity has to deal with the fact that her parents are breaking up. Those are my two top Felicity episodes. Other than one other episode that we're going to talk about in today's episode, those are my top two.
This one is, like you said, a really strong episode overall, and even the Ben storyline with his dad is handled really well, because when he finds out, that he's being made power of attorney and that his dad is, really sick, at first he doesn't even realize how sick. And they have to kind of tell him, like, no, his liver doesn't work. Like, and they explain to him, and it takes a while for it to sink into Ben, which is kind of like real life where, when you get bad news like that, you're in shock. So it takes a while to process, and figure out and come to terms with what you're actually hearing and what you're understanding. So I thought that was really well done. And then, of course, the interesting decision in this episode is that Ben goes against his father's wishes for what his dad asked him before. And as we see in this arc, it ends up being a good thing because it does save his dad's life.
I really like the fact that all throughout the course of Felicity, we understand that Ben really didn't have a positive picture of his father growing up as a kid for obvious reasons.
Right.
But I really like the fact that eventually he breaks down in this episode. And I love I think it's one of the final scenes where Ben just walks into the hospital room and he kneels by his father and he says, I just want you to hang around just for a little longer. I love the fact that the writer of this episode decided to put that moment in there.
Yeah.
And also, I really identified with the fact that earlier on in the episode, like you said, Ben couldn't process. Because when I was told that my mom, because of a heart attack, had become basically a vegetable, it took me like a day and a half to really understand what that meant. And it even took me longer to deal with it. I mean, the way that I dealt with it long after my mom had gone was I wrote a movie to deal with it. But I really liked the way that Ben handled that as a character, because he could have flipped out, but the fact that he didn't flip out, and the fact that he dealt with it as measured as he could, I thought that was a great credit to the character as a whole.
Yeah, it really was. It was a good episode for that character and made him more relatable and likable. And, it is kind of funny. There is funny parts in this episode that is hugely serious. So I just want to mention that I do like that Scott Foley runs the gamut at the beginning. He's so exhausted and like just over his guidance counseling job. Like he can't stand it, that he's just trying to get any other job. And then, of course, by the end, he gets this big dramatic scene with Ben where he gets to unload. And we also get some like funny business where Richard accidentally leaves a message on Ben's answering machine that Felicity and Noel slept together, and they have to go on a mission to erase that answering machine message, which of course, and that information ends up coming out by the end of the episode anyway. But that whole bit where they realize that he left it on the message, and then they go over to Sean's house, and Sean is working on his first product for Schmagen Industries, his card vest. Those light moments make the dramatic stuff hit harder in the episode later too, I think, because we're laughing 1 minute and then like it's a real gut punch, those Ben and his dad scenes. And this is the first episode that introduces Lauren, played by Lisa Edelstein, Cuddy from House, any House fans out there. Her character ended up being a lot more important than at first glance.
I just want to point out here, Richard is like the worst friend ever.
He really
because
is.
he has this habit of just blurring out the most private information about his friends.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I'm like, sometimes I just want to hit him. But one thing that I forgot to mention in our previous episode, I'm really liking this sort of new direction that they decided to take with Noel in the fourth and final season, because Noel is at this point graduated and he's out in the world looking for a job, and I just love the fact that he really is struggling right now, and he's really depressed for the lack of a better word, or is going to get depressed. And all throughout the course of Felicity, Noel has been the one besides Felicity that is the most together.
Right.
And to see him sort of have to try and figure out, oh my God, what now? Why am I not being able to get a job? I've got this diploma and nothing is working for me. To see him, go through the motions of what it's like to try and land on your feet after you go through college, it's just really, really, really fun for me.
Yeah, for sure. Next episode that is actually on both of our lists again is the next episode. This whole arc, brought some really great episodes. So it is episode 7, The Storm, written by Jessica Queller, directed by Harry Weiner. And this is the one where, it mostly deals with the storm being the fallout from Noel and Felicity's one-night stand. Now that Ben knows, Dee Wallace shows up as as Ben's mom, to come and visit him, to visit his father. And, we deal with Noel is also feeling, alienated because of what happened. And so he gets a new job and he throws himself into that job. And this is the first episode with Sarah Jane Morris as Zoe. And in a very serious episode, again, one of my favorite moments in this entire season is when Noel and Zoe are making out at his new job, and they accidentally stumble into her dad's office, and he's still there working, and he goes, "What is going on?" And Noel's like, and he's trying to think up an excuse, and then they both just say, "We thought you left." And he's like, "Yeah, we thought you had left. Like, we were gonna do it. Well, I got nothing." And then he gets fired from his job. But of course, the meat is that Ben now knows, and him and Felicity are having a really tough time. Ben doesn't even want to talk it out. He doesn't want to hear any of the stuff, because the stuff with his dad is weighing so heavily on him. It makes sense why this is just another thing that he's not receptive to, her explaining away why this happened and why they should still be together. He is not about it in this episode at all.
I felt this was actually one of my favorite episodes of the season, and I felt really, really bad for Ben for obvious reasons, like I just said. But I felt really, really bad for Felicity, because every time that she tried to get his attention and to basically plead on her freaking knees, he just wasn't having it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? I want to hate you right now, but I don't. But I understand your pain, because I know what it's like to want to say something to somebody and just not to have them be receptive at all, to the point where it feels like you're almost trying to punch a wall and the wall won't break,
Right.
So I really, really enjoyed. Oh, I didn't enjoy. I'm not going to say the word enjoy because it wasn't fun, but I really appreciated the way that Carrie Russell emoted herself in this episode.
Yeah.
Because you could just see the pain and anguish on her face. And I love when actors do that, when they go the extra mile to convey an emotion or have like big speeches. And this episode has one giant moment at the end that I just really, really love. But I love that when actors really reach for it. And I thought that Kay Russell did a fantastic job in this episode in particular.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she was fantastic. She really got a lot of meat there, and there's a lot of subtlety to the performance. And you can see she's always been good, but she's come a long way in the 4 years in knowing how to say so much more with just a look or a glance rather than, having to even say anything.
No, her all throughout the season, with Ben and Felicity's relationship drama, she says so much by just her face. Mm-hmm. In one episode in particular that we're going to talk about also in later on, she just has like this way, like what she does with her eyes. It's like, I mean, I'm not sure that all actors can do it, but just the way that she does it is so good.
Yeah.
And so present and it's like something a little extra that necessarily may have been written on the page or may not have been written on the page, but I enjoyed that very, very much. Also, I did like the fact that the first job that Noah was able to get in months is the job where he finds this nice girl with some issues.
Yep.
And he just has like the worst luck ever. And the fact that, he's kind of going through some stuff now and he decides to do something really stupid. Yeah. And he's actually, he loses his job because he does something really stupid. But
yeah, I'm telling you, the line reading from Scott Foley of "We thought you left" was like I was laughing for like 5 minutes. I had to pause it. It was just so funny.
Mm-hmm. No, like I said, and the final scene of I think it's the final scene, or it may not be the final scene, but the scene of Felicity inviting Ben to the Chinese restaurant, mm-hmm. and then Ben saying to Felicity, "Look, I didn't come all this way to talk. I came all this way because you said that you had something to say. What did you have to say?" Yeah. And the fact that she just can't. I mean, you could see it on her face. She's trying to get her thoughts together, but she just can't. And to that point when Ben walks out and Felicity runs after him and she goes, just on the middle of the street, she goes, "I love you." And then Ben turns around and he says, "I just can't right now." That broke me into pieces. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can call me a romantic sap all you want, but that broke me into pieces right there.
Yeah, what's so frustrating is that when he shows up for that, she doesn't have anything prepared, even though she's already written him a letter that he didn't read that tells like everything of how she was feeling and why, but she can't articulate it because it's too strong of feeling. And, they're in such a weird place that, that moment on the street, she hopes will be the thing that can bring them back, and it's just not. Mm-hmm. So next on my list is one of my picks, which is the next episode, episode 8, The Last Thanksgiving, written by Josh Reams, directed by David Petrarca. And the main reason I threw it on here is because Felicity is known for its Thanksgiving episodes, and this is the last Thanksgiving episode. And also it is the last Thanksgiving that all of our friends are going to have together, mostly. And it is fraught with horrible tension because of what has gone on between Ben and Felicity. And Ben brings Lauren as his date to the Thanksgiving dinner, which is just such a spiteful, like, awful thing to do. And there's no way that Ben doesn't know that it's this thing, but he's playing it off as if it's no big deal. So it digs deeper into his pain with the whole situation and with his dad and with Lauren. But it's very frustrating to watch him treat Felicity this way by bringing Lauren to the dinner. And especially knowing that it's the last time before all these people graduate and go to different parts of the world, that this Thanksgiving isn't, happy and great, but that's how most people's Thanksgivings end up turning out. You think it's going to be one thing and it ends up being something else. Then the B story is that Noel is super lost right now and depressed, and his brother visits, and they're supposed to go out for a nice holiday dinner and spend some time with each other. And Noel ends up getting drunk, meeting a woman in a bar, and getting robbed and handcuffed naked in a hotel room and having to call for help, which just shows how far down he has fallen and how much he is struggling. Because while it is really funny, his brother says, dude, look at yourself right now. I was supposed to be here for us to have a nice Thanksgiving as brothers, and you got drunk and were trying to pick up chicks in a bar, and this happened. So it's a wake-up call for Noel to realize that, he's spiraling and he maybe needs to get some more help. So I thought there was a lot going on. And the fact that, it's the Thanksgiving episodes of Felicity are kind of monumental, so I had to include it on this one.
I love when my favorite shows do theme episodes. Mm-hmm. And theme episodes, it can be a Christmas episode or any kind of holiday episode. And Felicity's Thanksgiving episodes are just great. But the thing that I really enjoyed about this episode, but I wanted to stand up and hit her in the face.
Yeah.
Megan was like the worst host ever, because all she did the entire episode was instigate. Right? She didn't have to say what she did, say what she said at the dinner table. But the fact that she did really pissed me off. But I understand why she did it, because she's looking out for her girl Felicity. But she didn't have to stick it to Ben while they were all having while they all were having Thanksgiving dinner. She could have waited to do that even before or after the dinner.
Right.
But the fact that she did it in such a rude, inconsiderate manner to Lauren, despite what you may think of her, she doesn't know these people. She doesn't know who Megan is.
Right.
You know? But I'm like, Jesus, can't you just give the guy a break? Mm-hmm. But that's neither here nor there. I did like the fact that Noel's brother does come back into town. I'm not 100% sure if that's the same actor from the earlier seasons, but that actor, I'm familiar with that actor because I like Warehouse 13.
Yeah, Eddie McClintock.
Thank you. Fax man, thank you. I should know that because I love Warehouse 13, but it was really nice to see him again, and for him to be the guy that says, "Oh my God, no, what is wrong with you? There's something off. Don't you just see it?" And for him to be the guy to finally make Noel pay attention, like you said, is just great. And the whole scene with him picking up the woman in the bar and being handcuffed to the bed, I thought that was just great. That was just wonderful to see.
Yeah, and so Eddie McClintock was his brother in season 1. So he did do 2 episodes. And yeah, like when the cops come in and he puts the lampshade over Noel's junk, it's ridiculous. But a lot of fun, even though, it's a wake-up call for Noel. So next on your list is episode 11, A Perfect Match, written by Julie Blumberg, Joy Gregory, directed by good old Lawrence Trilling. Marcelo, tell us about this episode.
I love this episode because this episode is like a sequel to one of the earlier episodes that we talked about. This episode really brings the storyline between Ben, his father's condition, and his mother. And the thing that I love about this episode is that all throughout the course of the episode, you see Ben sort of struggle with the fact that he has power of attorney over his father's medical decisions. And when his mother says, I'm a match, I could actually have surgery right now and fix my husband, the fact that Ben get over what his father has done to him in the past is really something sort of heartbreaking and frustrating to see.
Yeah.
I wasn't brought up in a bad household. I'm lucky that I was brought up with love and affection, but I really, really felt for Ben and his anguish in this episode. Also, the thing that I really appreciate in this episode is Felicity really, in this episode in particular, she has sort of tried, she hasn't given up, but she's sort of pushed the pause button on the, I need to fix things with Ben. She's really, she has made up her mind to what, I'm just going to be here. I'm not going to push him anymore.
Right.
I'm not going to, outwardly, scream from the rooftops, I love you. Why haven't you taken me back?
Yeah.
She really flips the switch on Ben, and she makes him have to choose.
Right.
And I really, really love sort of the midway point of this episode where Felicity actually is about to get on a plane to go home, and Ben actually makes up his mind finally, and runs to the airport and says, I want to start over. One of the greatest character quirks that JJ and Matt gave Felicity, I think, is her power to forgive. And I don't know. Let's say, look. I'm completely straight, but if I was dating a guy like Ben, I don't know if I would be able to forgive somebody like that again and again and again and again and again and again. Right. And the power that she has to just forgive stuff, to me, is just amazing. And the fact that she says, I'm not going anywhere. I just love that scene. I love scenes with characters who I really love in airports. And I really got a flashback to an episode of Dawson's Creek where Joey and Dawson kiss and make up in an airport. So that just gave me like all sorts of flashbacks. That happened in One Tree Hill too, by the way. Yeah. I just love this episode for the conflict, the main conflict between Ben and his mother and Ben and Felicity. I thought this episode was really, really great and really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, and you know what I liked is that this was the fall finale or the winter finale before they went on like a big break, and they didn't add some sort of horrible cliffhanger. Like, when Ben and Felicity, they patched things up. It wasn't like, ooh, will they, won't they? We're going to leave that over the break. They actually just let it ride, which, in other seasons we've seen that when it's come to the fall finale or whatever, they've sometimes pulled a cliffhanger out of nowhere or done a cheap trick, but they just let this stand on its own, which was nice.
All throughout these 4 seasons, I feel like I need like anxiety pills dealing with Ben and Felicity. I mean, for God's sakes, people, get to it. But I understand. I get it.
Right. And so the next episode on my list is episode 14, Raising in Arizona, written by Andrea Newman, directed by Harry Weiner, where things again go off the rails for Ben and Felicity. They had been back on track and everything was looking kind of good. But then the previous episode, Ben found out that Lauren is pregnant, and now he has taken the paternity test. He knows that it is his. And initially he said he didn't want to be involved at all. And in this episode, he starts to realize that maybe that will be like a big life regret if he isn't there, because he will just be like his own dad who wasn't there. So he realizes that it's important for him to be there for his kid. But then Lauren throws a wrench in everything and tells him that she is moving to Arizona. So Ben starts exploring his options to see if he can apply to be pre-med in Arizona. And his prof says, yeah, I can pull strings, but I need to know if this is 100% what you want to do. And, there's a whole deal where Noel casually tells Felicity, like, hey, there was a message for Ben that if he wants to go to Arizona, he's got to apply by the end of the week. And so Felicity is freaked out by this. And when Ben finds out that Noel told Felicity, he flies off the handle and he's really mad, thinking that, Noel was trying to sabotage their relationship when it wasn't any grand scheme. Like, Noel wasn't scheming. It was just an off the cuff, hey, this is happening. And Ben reacts really badly to it. And there's even a moment where Felicity and Ben have a big fight, and Ben basically says, like, I'm done. And he tells Felicity that this whole thing with Lauren being pregnant is her fault. And it's really like one of the worst Ben moments where you're just like, dude, come on. Like, we've been rooting for you and Felicity. We know you're going to have your ups and downs. But for him to try and put the blame for him getting Lauren pregnant because they were on a break, put the blame on Felicity for sleeping with Noel, it's really petty and a really bad look for Ben. And also Felicity is dealing with, can she move to Arizona? She's got a lot of stuff going on with her own future and a big opportunity in New York. So she's really trying to figure out, if that is something she can do or not. And then we get some comedic moments with Javier and Megan are both going out for the same audition now that they're both in the same acting class, to get a paying gig, and they both sabotage their own auditions so that the other one will get it. But of course, none of them get it. And then after all of the fighting and all of the, Felicity and Ben and all of that stuff, the episode does end with things basically patched up, and Ben invites Noel to Epstein Bar to hang out with Felicity and him, kind of extending an olive branch, realizing that he's been an idiot and a jerk, and, trying to still figure out he wants to be involved in his kid's life, and Felicity wants to stay in New York, so they are kind of at an impasse here. They're not sure what the future is going to bring, but they're going to try and work through it.
I'm not going to lie to you, Matt, but when Ben put all the blame on Felicity and blamed her for Ben's idiotic behavior, I wanted to punch that guy through a wall.
Yeah, big time.
Because I'm like, dude, really? First of all, this girl changed her entire life for you. You've made her suffer God knows how many times, and you've done this. Anything that you've done, anything that she's done to you is forgivable, right? But the thing is, for you to lay something like that at someone's feet, that's not cool. I'm like,
right.
Felicity did F up, but she didn't F up as bad as you did.
Right.
I'm like, really, Ben? You're really wanting me to root for Felicity to end up with Noel, for God's sakes. I mean, I've always been Felicity and Ben, but every time I see this episode makes me want to go the other way.
Right. It does.
I did sort of sympathize. Look, with all that being said, I did sort of like that Ben understood that he has to be the best father that he can be, and he has to be their fourth child. And the fact that when he first went to speak with Lauren about the fact that he wants to, he wanted to be involved in his child's life in the best way that he could, she wasn't necessarily, quote unquote, receptive to it,
right?
Quote unquote, that receptive to it. Sorry, people, I can't speak English.
She wasn't sure if he was just saying that to get her to stay, and then he'll talk a big game but won't actually show up.
Right, but the fact that he actually came back and sort of gave her that stern talking to,
Yeah.
really made me, as much as I wanted to hit him in the face in this episode, it
Right.
made me appreciate him that much more, and the point that and the fact that made me say, okay, Benny's cool again. The fact that he did, like you said, offer that olive branch to Noel and Felicity, and to see them all of them there at Epstein Bar drinking together. That's a great name of a bar, by the way.
Yeah.
It was just a great, heartwarming way to end this episode. I really enjoyed this episode. I really did.
Yeah, I thought it was really nice. And that moment, because Ben is such a dink in part of it, to then have that final moment, kind of smooths things over. And it's like, okay, this guy's all right. Next is an episode on both of our list, originally envisioned as the series finale of Felicity. It is episode 17, The Graduate, written by Josh Reams, Jennifer Levin, directed by the one and only Scott Foley. And of course, this was the episode. They thought it was the final episode. And as they were shooting it, literally they were shooting this episode, the WB called up and said, we need 5 more. And they were like, okay, well, we already wrote this. And so they had to do something completely different. So this feels like if you stopped watching after The Graduate, you would be satisfied you got the full Felicity experience. This episode, some really great moments. They're all going to graduate. So there's a lot of everybody getting ready to say goodbye. And there are tender moments where Felicity does say goodbye, to Megan and Sean, to Javier, who gives her the Dean and DeLuca Employee of the Month plaque that he wants her to come back and visit, and Elena, and Felicity packing up her place and writing her name in the closet, Felicity Porter 02. Also, her and Ben getting engaged in like a kind of untraditional, not, super romantic kind of way, just like hey, we should do this. And they decide, yes, they should. Noel and Sean lose their job after they had joined that firm. And so they've got to figure out what they're going to do. And by this point, even though Ben and Felicity, get engaged, as the episode goes on, Ben realizes like he has to go to Arizona. So even though he wants Felicity to come with him, but she says to him, look, I just graduated. It's my time. And I chased you here. I followed you. Now is your turn. So you go to Arizona and you do what you want. I'm going back to Palo Alto. If you want me, come and get me. And if not, I wish you all the best. Which is one of those like, oh, wow. And then we get, a time jump where we see what has happened, and we get caught up where we get the actual, what I think, was the best way they could have ended the show, which is Felicity at school in California, and Ben does show up and says, you were right. It was my turn to come after you. And I thought that was a nice mirroring of the first episode.
Every time that I rewatch Felicity, which is a lot, every time I get to this episode, I just stand up and cheer, because I'm not a fan of the additional 5 episodes.
Yeah.
So every time I watch the show, this is the last episode that I watch.
Yeah, for sure.
This episode has such a feeling of everything is ending, to where you feel like, oh my God, everything is ending.
Right.
Like this episode made me feel like I felt the day that I was graduating high school, for God's sakes.
Yep.
The day that I graduated high school, it was such a fun day, but it was like an unreal moment where I couldn't believe that I got there, right?
Yeah.
I even did a Felicity moment where I put on my cap and gown early, and I just stood in front of the mirror, just staring at myself, going, "How the hell did I get here?"
Right.
Right. Also, I do love the fact that God love them, but Felicity's parents are such a pain in the ass that they can't that they specifically Felicity's father can't seem to get out of his own way.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he feels inclined enough to push her towards medicine just really irked me. But the fact that she eventually does eventually go back to medicine, but the thing that I like is in the final narration of this episode when she says, "I decided to go back home and I decided to do pre-med, but now I know it was for me and not for them." I did enjoy that a lot, and I thought that for a first-time director, Scott Foley did a wonderful job helming this episode. And one shot I particularly liked is when Felicity is receiving her diploma. The shot that Scott chose actually does a pretty good job of mirroring the shot of her parents from the pilot.
Yep.
Which I thought was interesting. I don't know if you caught that, Matt, but I thought that was very, very interesting. Also, I love the fact that she writes her name in the closet.
Yep.
I think that was very, very cool because I believe it was like earlier in the season when she first gets to the apartment, she notices all the names, which is a really fun tradition to do, and I like the fact that she continued that tradition. But with that being said, my favorite scene of the entire episode is that scene when, after dealing with her father, Felicity just gives Ben the ultimatum. She goes, "Look, I came here for you. It's your turn now." I just love that scene when Felicity goes, "Okay, I ain't having it anymore. This is how I feel, and you can do with this whatever you want to do."
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, 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 yes. You put it on his shoulders, girl.
Big time.
I just, oh my God. Every time that I see this episode, that moment makes me just stand up and cheer, like I said. But I love this episode because it feels so sad, but it feels so satisfying to me. And the ending, when he shows up and he goes, "You were right. It was my turn now." I was just in tears. The first time I saw this series, I was just in tears, and the subsequent times that I've seen this episode, I just love it. I thought that it was so well done, and it was such a nice way to end the show if you choose to end the show here and you don't choose to watch the additional 5 episodes, which I thought was a dick move by the WB because they told them that they were canceling them, number one. They took all their money away, number two. And then to do this was just kind of a dick move by their part. I didn't like the fact that they gave them 5 additional episodes. That really ticked me off.
Yeah, especially because this is the perfect ending, right? Like, they wrap up so much stuff. Now, the only thing, and you mentioned it, she goes into medicine. And she says, not because my parents wanted me to, but because I wanted to. Which is fine, but it's like the only thing that really bothers me about this episode. Because, being an artist is always a hard road. Like, it just is. No matter what your art is. If it's writing, if it's actual art, you're going to hear no a million times. You're going to be frustrated. There are going to be people who don't like what you do. But basically, Felicity, after trying to get into 50 galleries and after being told no, we find out that she just gives up on it and goes back to what she was originally going to do. I thought, wow, for a show created by people who work in the arts, that is such a weird thing to throw into the show. I know that they probably did it to make sense of why Felicity couldn't do what she wanted to do in Arizona. She was going to go to that specific school, whereas if she was just an artist doing her art wherever, there would be no real reason why she would have to be grounded in one place. But it just rings so false to me, especially because her parents, even in this episode, are so horrible about art not being a legitimate pursuit. As much as I dislike Felicity's parents, there is a funny moment with Richard doing it yet again. Richard is in the elevator with Felicity's dad, and he's just like, how weird is this, Grandpa? And he's like, wait a minute, are you Grandpa? Like, I don't know. Ben has a kid now, and of course, this is all new information to Felicity's dad. So I thought that was so funny that, he finds out his daughter is engaged, and she's engaged to a guy who just had a kid with someone else, all in the course of an afternoon, and he's kind of freaking out. So I enjoyed seeing him squirm and be uncomfortable because I dislike him so much.
He is really, we've talked about it on this podcast ad nauseum. He's really, really to the point of being psychotic, overprotective.
Yeah.
And the fact that he always feels like sticking his nose in and pushing his daughter into one particular profession, it never bothered me that the writers decided to make her a doctor. But to go off of your point, it would have been really interesting to see her not pursue medicine, but to go into the arts.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically painting. The reason why that is significant is because, like I said in the pilot episode of this podcast, the person who inspired Felicity as a whole was a girl who JJ saw in one of the classes that he was taking. He was taking an art class, and he saw a girl fiddling with some paint in the corner one day in class.
Right.
So that's where the initial kernel of Felicity came from. And it would have been cool if the showrunners of Felicity for season 4 would have decided to do that instead of her becoming a doctor. Because if they would have done that, I would have been okay with Ben becoming a doctor instead of Felicity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have balanced things out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But the fact that she is a doctor doesn't bother me as much as it does you, but it kind of bothers me just a little bit, but not as much as it does you.
Yeah, it just feels like a cop-out to me. But everything else about this episode, really great. I love that when we catch up with Noel and Sean have a business together and they're happy and enjoying life. Megan is going to be a psychiatrist, which is, Megan, psychiatrist? Like, what? So that's kind of funny. And then, of course, like we already mentioned, that last scene, perfect last scene. If you turn it off there, awesome.
If I could just say one thing about Noel and Sean as business partners.
Yeah.
Sean is really, I don't know if it was in this episode or if it was in earlier episodes. I can't remember where this is. But Sean is he's really overconfident. And he is really, to the point of talking to customers, to the point of not being, not insulting, but he just doesn't listen.
Right.
And that kind of made me a little, it kind of made me like Sean's character just a little, not like him just a little bit, because the fact that he doesn't listen and he actually let his ego get in the way of them getting a contract really said, come on, man, all you had to do was listen to the guy. Mm-hmm. And you're working for him. If he doesn't like something that you designed for him, I'm sorry, this is not in this episode, but if you don't like something that somebody designed for you, if I'm paying you, it's your responsibility to fix it.
Right.
And the fact that Sean couldn't separate his feelings from his business really made me a little angry. But the fact that Noel and Sean actually start a business in this season, start a company this season, I thought was a really interesting way to take Noel's character.
Yeah.
Because I thought that he was going to end up working at a place like Apple or something.
Right.
The first time I saw this show, because I was like, that'd be the most perfect thing ever. If he starts working for Steve Jobs, that would be perfect. That would be awesome. But I really like the fact that they hitched Sean with Noel. You know, at first I thought that Sean was sort of piggybacking of Noel's success. So I really didn't vibe with that. That part of the story, that I felt that Sean was sort of like piggybacking on Noel's success, and I wasn't necessarily comfortable with their relationship when it first popped up.
Right.
But as it went on, I grew to appreciate it. Minus that part of Sean not getting out of his own way really ticked me off.
Right. So last episode is one on your list, which is episode 20, Spin the Bottle, written by Joy Gregory, directed by Harry Weiner. It's from the Back to the Future fantasy mix-up timeline, and it features the return of Julie. Yeah,
well, you just took the words right out of my mouth. The only reason in the world that I picked this episode was because Amy Jo Johnson.
Yeah.
I really like the fact that this episode sort of puts to rest the Sean and Julie thing.
Right.
Like I mentioned it in a previous episode that I was disappointed that they never really explored where that relationship could have gone, or what they wanted to do, or what JJ wanted to do. But obviously JJ couldn't do anything with it because Amy Jo let the show because of personal reasons. Mm-hmm. But I love the fact that the writers decided to do this crazy Back to the Future thing, and they decided to deal with this Sean and Julie thing. And I really like the way that Felicity's hair is colored a different way, and Ben's hair looks different. This episode looks, I mean, it looks like any other episode, but there's something about it that makes it look not right?
Well, almost, I think all 5 of these episodes are slightly different looking than the rest of the series. Like, they've desaturated the color a little bit, because it's Fantasyland or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. No, and I just love that scene when after they have the big blowout in the sort of Chinese restaurant that they go in after they go back to the loft, and they play the game of Spin the Bottle. Mm-hmm. I just love that entire sequence, and like I said, this episode isn't much to me except Amy Jo Johnson. Yeah. But I just love the fact that we got to see her one last time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love seeing, for the sake of a better word, the original cast together in an off-kilter episode. Like you said, the colors are a little bit desaturated, and something just seems a little off. And I just love that aspect. Also, a thing that I'm completely forgetting here is look, I've said constantly on this podcast, I've always been a Felicity and Ben person.
Yeah.
But I love seeing Felicity and Noel together. I just love the sort of loving and careness that they have to their relationship. Felicity and Ben, they don't have that. Well, to me, they have that, but it's a little different.
Right.
It's a little bit more. It's a little bit more heated, right?
Yeah.
The relationship that Felicity has with Noel is a little bit more loving and a little bit more Well, I'm not gonna. Oh, fine. I'll say it. It's a little bit more symbiotic.
Yeah.
Than the relationship that she has with Ben ultimately, and I just love seeing small little moments in this episode, like when they're looking for an apartment, or you know, when they're in bed together, and you know they're trying to, you know, right. I just love small little moments like that. So that's the only reason. So those reasons are the only reasons that I picked this episode, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, now that we're kind of like wrapping things up, you can watch those 5 episodes if you want as a fun like what if, and I do like that over those episodes they bring back a lot of familiar faces. We revisit key moments and see them in a different light. So it is fun to like hang out with the characters for that extended period of time. But the ending of Graduation, The Graduate, feels so right that then when they kick off this whole arc by having Elena be dead and all this other stuff that then, snowballs into this 5-episode arc where Felicity brings Elena back from the dead in like a really confusing way. And the final episode of the actual series, Back to the Future, is like a clip show. Half of it is her telling stuff and us seeing the greatest hits, which, when we had such a great actual finale, it all just feels like, yeah, this would have been a nice 5-episode bonus feature on the DVD. But as part of the actual show, I wish that, you could watch those episodes like in the middle of season 4, so that then you can watch the final actual run with a good ending. So I would say, for no reason whatsoever, after a perfect match, so after episode 11, then jump ahead and watch 18 to 22, and then come back and start with the great final run of 12 to 17, and then the show goes out on a high. What are your final thoughts on the season as a whole, and, what Felicity means to you?
No, I just wanted to say that I really don't. I haven't seen the additional 5 episodes of Felicity in a while, but before I get to the point that I want to get to, I just want to say one thing. I'm like, what were these people thinking? Like, what were these writers thinking? I understand that they gave them like no time, but I'm like, really? You guys had to do all this crazy, wacky stuff?
Right.
I'm like, no, but I was like, but then making it all be in her head, Felicity having a fever dream, that's all fine. But like Matt said, when I watch Felicity, I stop with The Graduate. The Graduate is my final episode of Felicity. So, yeah. Going back to what you said before I added that extra soliloquy there, I've really been excited about. I really wanted to get to this episode because at the start of this podcast, I said that Felicity is my favorite show of all time, and I kept teasing that I'm going to tell you why. And now that I'm about to tell you why, I'm getting kind of emotional, but here it goes. About 8 years ago, I made the worst and the best decision of my life. I'm going to explain that in a minute. I told I made the bad decision of trying to tell the love of my life how I felt about her, and she unceremoniously threw me under the bus. She really ripped my heart out, put it on the floor, and then set it on fire.
We've all been there.
Yeah. No, but yeah. But I've loved this particular person since she was like 16. So, I don't know what this says about me, but just hold your judgment for a second.
Right.
And I really felt like going under a rock somewhere and dying. As a matter of fact, I was depressed for over a year. I lost a year of my life.
Yeah.
On this. And the one thing besides my friends and my family, the one thing that really stitched me back together and made me feel like I would be able to get over this and everything was going to be okay was watching Felicity. That was the first time that I decided to watch Felicity. I had been told about it by a therapist of mine who actually was my therapist for about 5 or 6 years. It was her favorite show, but I don't know what made me want to watch the show. And each episode that I watched sort of put me back together. And when I got to the end of it, I felt that Felicity put me back together episode by episode. That's why I think of Felicity. That's why I have such a special place in my heart for Felicity, because Felicity, in many ways, this is going to sound pretentious as hell, but Felicity brought me back to life and put me back together again. And I had the opportunity to actually have a short correspondence with Matt Reeves on Twitter. And I believe I was talking about his film, Let Me In. That's how I started the conversation. But I actually brought this up to him, and he actually wrote me this nice long message. He was extremely touched and extremely touched that his show, or the show that he helped create with JJ, could have such an effect on someone like me. And that's why I say, if you're a person listening to this right now and you like a show and somebody tells you it doesn't matter, that's horseshit.
Right.
Because a show like Felicity or any show means someone to the person that's watching it. So if a show does something for you, don't be ashamed of spreading your love for that show. If that show is important to you, like Felicity is to me, or like Dawson's Creek is to me, scream it from the rooftops if you want, because the show can make a difference in someone's life. Felicity made a difference in my life in ways that I continue to be thankful for until this day, and I'm just beyond thankful to JJ and Matt for creating this wonderful show and for helping me get over possibly one of the worst periods of my life. I just want to say thank you to them, and it's been great.
That is the power of good art, right? It can reflect things going on in your own life, or help you work through something and be a catharsis and find a special place in your heart. And Felicity is definitely a great show for that.
Yeah. With that being said, before you bring us home on Felicity, Matt, what does this show mean to you?
For me, it's like a fun nostalgia trip because, I liked Dawson when I was younger, and then I watched this. And like I said, a lot of the stuff that happens in Felicity in terms of college and all that kind of thing reflected a lot of stuff in people that I knew when I went to university. So it reminds me of that time because so much of it feels true to life. And from the very first episode I ever saw, I had an immediate lifelong crush on Kerry Russell, who still to this day, if Kerry Russell is in anything, I will watch it.
Kerry Russell is great.
And just because she's so good. And, beyond that, just such great characters and sharp, funny writing, but it's the heart and the emotion that makes this a show you want to revisit again and again. And it was the first time that I was like, who is this J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves guys? I wasn't like a diehard fan of Forever Young or Taking Care of Business or anything. So this was the first thing that like made me say like, there's something here. So as we say goodbye to Felicity Porter, next week we are saying hello to Sydney Bristow. So we are closing this chapter out, and we will be back next week taking a look at the very first episode of Alias. So you're definitely going to want to check that out to see what JJ had up his sleeves. And as we go through Alias, we will get to some familiar faces from our good old Felicity gang. If you want to reach me, I am at Matt Crandall on Twitter. And if you have any questions or comments about the show, hashtag Radio815. Marcelo, what's the best way they can reach you?
If you want to reach me, you could just basically do the same thing, except I'm on Twitter at CreekFanatic88.
Perfect. So that is Felicity. We're tying it up. We're putting a bow on it, and we're not going to cast a spell and bring friends back from the dead. We will be back next week with Alias as our J.J. Abrams-a-thon continues. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Have a good day.